Harris passed away in 1991 from ovarian cancer. In 2013, their daughter Charlotte died at the age of 41 from the same disease.
Imagine losing not one, but two loved ones to the same devastating illness. For Pierce Brosnan, this nightmare became a heartbreaking reality when his first wife and daughter both succumbed to ovarian cancer. How did this double tragedy affect Brosnan's personal life, and what role did genetics play in the devastating loss of his loved ones? As a man who has often played heroes on screen, Brosnan's real-life story is one of sorrow and strength. His advocacy for ovarian cancer awareness and the emotional weight he carries reveal a side of him few know. What inspired his commitment to raise awareness for the disease that took both his wife and daughter? A tragic story of two lives and one disease. Losing someone you love to a disease is a heart-wrenching experience that changes you forever. Now imagine that same disease taking someone else you hold dear. That's exactly what Pierce Brosnan went through, and it's almost hard to fathom. The loss of both his wife, Cassandra Harris, and his daughter Charlotte to ovarian cancer feels like something out of a cruel twist of fate. You know, life can feel pretty unpredictable, but this is a kind of pain no one could ever prepare for. When we talk about love and loss, Brosnan's story is one that sticks with you. First, it was his wife, Cassandra, taken away far too soon by ovarian cancer in 1991, at just 43 years old. But it didn't end there. Fast forward more than 2 decades, and the same cruel disease claimed his daughter Charlotte in 2013, at just 41. Can you even imagine the weight of that? Not just losing one person to cancer, but two beloved women in his life, both taken by the same disease. We may refer to it as a coincidence, but the truth is far more profound than that. Cassandra, the initial loss felt like a tragedy in and of itself. However, the fact that it occurred once more with Charlotte, who is her daughter and his child, makes the pain much more intense. In its own icy manner, it is almost as if the cosmos made the decision to hit him with the same catastrophe over and over again. Don't you believe that life can be so brutally unfair at times? There are times when it appears as though the same history keeps repeating itself in the most excruciating manner. On the other hand, Brosnan's story is not solely about his own personal suffering. What matters is the manner in which he dealt with that sorrow. The majority of us are unable to even fathom how we might deal with such a loss. But Brosnan, rather than withdrawing from the situation, saw a method to transform his suffering into something more. There is something more significant. In the course of his advocacy and awareness efforts for ovarian cancer, he has been successful in shedding attention on a disease that was responsible for the deaths of 2 of the most significant women in his world. As for that, this demonstrates a level of character depth that is not often seen. On the contrary, he did not simply relax and allow the waves of melancholy to wash over him. Not at all. He accomplished something. But before we get into how Brosnan became a voice for ovarian cancer awareness, let's actually take a time to comprehend what it means for a spouse to lose both their wife and their daughter to the same disease. Brosnan's wife and daughter both passed away from ovarian cancer. Is it even possible for you to fathom the anguish that would result from that? What is the emotional burden? Which questions remain unanswered? These women were not only figures in a headline from his perspective, rather these were the women he loved the most in the entire world. And they were snatched away from him by ovarian cancer, which is a disease that is both scary and difficult to diagnose well. Possibly you are wondering, what caused that to take place? Is there a known genetic connection? In addition, is it conceivable that Brosnan himself might have acquired some kind of hereditary susceptibility to the disease? Put that idea on hold just a moment because we are about to get into it. But before we get into it, let's take a moment to contemplate the concept of a loss of this magnitude. To put it another way, how many people in the world have been through a tragedy similar to this one? It's not a lot, is it? To put it mildly, it's too much to bear. But Pierce Brosnan wasn't alone in this. He had to process not just the shock, but the fear too. The fear that ovarian cancer could have been a ticking time bomb within his own family, something that could impact other loved ones. It must have been an overwhelming thought, like a shadow hanging over everything. But to truly understand what happened here, we need to look deeper into the genetics behind ovarian cancer. Was there a hereditary link? Could there have been something in Cassandra's and Charlotte's genes that made them more susceptible? Stick around, because the science behind all of this is as important as the emotional story itself. How Pierce Brosnan coped with the losses of his wife and daughter. Okay, let's get real for a second. When you lose someone you love, it's a kind of heartbreak that changes you forever. For Pierce Brosnan, losing both his wife Cassandra and his daughter Charlotte to ovarian cancer wasn't just a tragedy. It was a life-altering, soul-shattering experience that you can't even begin to fathom unless you've been through it. But here's the thing. Despite the crushing pain of those losses, Brosnan managed to keep going, to somehow find purpose in the grief. So how did he cope with something that would break most of us into a million pieces? How did he survive when the two most important women in his life were taken from him by the same cruel disease? Let's start with his first heartbreak, the loss of his wife, Cassandra. Imagine it. You're at the height of your career, you're enjoying the life you've always dreamed of, and then bam, your world is torn apart. Cassandra's diagnosis came in 1987, and after years of fighting, she passed away in 1991. That alone would be more than enough to break most people. Losing your soulmate, the one person you share everything with, the mother of your children. It's the kind of loss that leaves an indelible mark on your soul. For Brosnan, it was like losing a part of himself. In addition, we need to discuss what it must have been like to be a witness to Cassandra's deterioration. When you are a spouse, you can't help but want to make things better for the person you love and to prevent them from experiencing any kind of hardship. On occasion, however, despite all of your efforts, you find that you are powerless. Just try to picture the feelings of rage, powerlessness, and guilt. It's beyond comprehension. Despite this, Brosnan remained by her side throughout the entire ordeal. Despite the fact that he was aware of the outcome, he continued to turn up every day, soothing her by holding her hand. The passing of Cassandra did not cause his love for her to disappear completely. Even when he was having to say his goodbyes, it continued to linger in every part of him. However, the suffering did not stop there. After finally moving on with his life, Pierce was confronted with an almost painful repeat of history in 2013, when his daughter Charlotte was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. This was just 2 years after he had finally gone on with his life. Do you agree that it is the worst dread of every parent? For you to witness your child going through the same excruciating struggle that you witnessed your spouse go through. The feeling of déjà vu, the horrifying realization that history was repeating itself, is what makes it much more gut-wrenching than it already was. The difference, however, was that Pierce Brosnan was no longer merely a husband grieving the loss of his wife. Rather, he was a father grieving the loss of his daughter. The discomfort was made worse by the situation. The thing is, no matter how much love you have for someone, there is no amount of love that can protect them from developing cancer. It is a harsh act. What matters is not how strong your bond is or how hard you struggle. It does not matter. Charlotte put up a courageous fight, but in the end, the sickness proved to be too much for her to conquer, just as it had been for her mother before her. The question is, how did Brosnan deal with everything? What is the first step in dealing with such a significant amount of loss? In all honesty, there is no formula for dealing with this kind of sadness. Brosnan, however, did what many people who are mourning do. He found ways to continue living, even when the weight of everything seemed to be too much for him to take. It was his faith that he relied on. He discovered solace in his family, particularly in his sons, who were his strongest support system. The assistance that he received from his new wife, Keely Shea Smith, was also an essential component in assisting him in his recovery and moving forward, even if it was just a small step at a time. Nevertheless, the most significant turning point in Brosnan's journey was not about his own sadness. Rather, it was about the way in which he chose to deal with it. It was possible for him to vanish from the public perspective. The world could have seen him as nothing more than a guy who had been damaged by tragedy if he had chosen to withdraw from the world. On the other hand, Brosnan leveraged his suffering to power something that was much larger than himself. In order to raise awareness about ovarian cancer, he became an advocate. It was not enough for him to merely sit back and be sad. He made the decision to speak out in order to bring attention to the illness that had removed so much from his life. Brosnan has openly shared how difficult it has been to cope with the loss of his wife and daughter. He's spoken about the lasting impact it's had on him, even years after their deaths. But what's truly inspiring is that instead of wallowing in despair, he used their stories to give a voice to those who were suffering in silence. Through his involvement in cancer organizations, his advocacy for early detection, and his relentless push to make ovarian cancer a priority in public health, Brosnan has turned his personal heartache into a cause greater than himself. But even with all that advocacy, you can tell there's a part of him that will never be whole again. How could he be? Losing two people you love to the same disease changes you in a way that's impossible to fully recover from. The grief will always be there, sitting quietly beneath the surface, reminding him of the love he once shared. But in the way he's channeled that grief into action, he's managed to turn pain into purpose. You can't help but admire that. He didn't let cancer win, not entirely. Sure, it took Cassandra and Charlotte, but Pierce Brosnan's response has been nothing short of heroic. He's using their stories to help save others. While Brosnan's personal journey is incredibly moving, what's equally important is the awareness he's brought to ovarian cancer. In the next part, we'll get into the ongoing fight against ovarian cancer and how Brosnan's efforts are contributing to the cause. Keep watching. The fight against ovarian cancer. Now, let's get to something that matters. What can we learn from Pierce Brosnan's heartbreaking experience, and how is he using his platform to fight back against this devastating disease? Here's the thing. Ovarian cancer is not recognized as it should be. That's one of those cancers that are known to be very elusive. Typically, it fails to make the radar until it is nearly too late, and by the time patients are noticeably unwell, it may be extremely progressed. That is why awareness and early detection remain significant. And guess what? There is Pierce Brosnan out here spearheading the whole phenomenon. He's not only mourning silently, he's actively raising awareness of the disease that killed his wife and daughter. This is why, following the deaths to ovarian cancer of Cassandra and Charlotte, Brosnan could have been expected to withdraw from public life and died in seclusion. As what was illustrated in the story, he opted to take that leadership position and do something. In the past, he has rallied for women to embrace counseling and testing if they have been informed that they are carriers of genes that lead to cancers. Now, as a man that has had his wife and his daughter die from this disease, he can tell anyone at all, that the secret to beating it is knowing that it's there early enough. In the case of Brosnan, his advocacy is not only limited to him speaking, it's about action. He's given his backing to some cause-related organizations such as the Ovarian Cancer Research Fund Alliance and other related organizations with the aim of funding research and bringing these funds to the limelight. It demonstrates the need for more awareness of ovarian cancer and its effect on families like his, as he has attended ceremonies, given speeches at fundraisers, and partnered with the doctors. But here's the twist. Whereas having Brosnan involved in the fight against ovarian cancer is a very personal endeavor, it is something that can save thousands and thousands of lives. Why? Because his story resonates. A celebrity they once idolized opened up about something that feels too personal, and people start listening. Brosnan's voice puts a face to ovarian cancer, making it difficult to look the other way. His experience transforms a health challenge to a type of a person's appeal for change. I must be honest, ovarian cancer sucks the big one. This is why it's sometimes called the silent killer. In its early stages, there may be symptoms such as bloating, difficulty swallowing, or pelvic pain. Since the symptoms are so general, many women present themselves in a rather advanced stage of the disease before diagnosis is made. But where early detection is possible, the impact and result can be a world apart. What Brosnan is pushing for is simple but critical: awareness. He's empowering all those women to go out there and ask the questions, to get out and go for the mammogram. If you have ever fallen ill, have a genetic predisposition to cancer, feel symptoms, do not hesitate. It is about prevention, about research, and of course about helping those families which are experiencing the same tragedy that he did. And to be perfectly honest, that Brosnan is still discussing this problem, several years after losing his wife and his daughter, is admirable in its own way. Instead of a grieving father and husband, he is a symbol of hope for so many women and families struggling with ovarian cancer. It is not about preserving the memory of their death and party. It is about preventing other people from going through what he had to go through. It's something that I believe a lot of people can learn from. Taking something as unfortunate as heartbreak and turning it into something that could potentially save lives. And that's powerful. It is not just about creating awareness and then relaying vital information as well. It is about change. Brosnan has not only advocated for buying ovarian cancer research among policy-making bodies and medical institutions. Unfortunately, the amount of money devoted to stimulate ovarian cancer seems to be significantly lower comparing to other kinds of tumors, even though the disease seems to be fatal. Brosnan stresses that much more must be done to support both early diagnosis and improved therapies. He understands for himself what it means to continue the fight, continue struggling for getting things done in order for future generations not to suffer the same as the previous ones. Although let us not be preposterous to think it is easy. Otherwise, Brosnan still bears the burden of losing his wife and daughter. It isn't possible for grief not to vanish because of the good that is being done in some places. It is always present, but never becomes noticeable. But what he's done is nothing short of incredible. He has actually converted a private misfortune into a public cause. And in doing so, he is building for himself a legacy that will outlive his movie-making years. Ultimately, Brosnan's fight for ovarian cancer is not for funding the research or for raising awareness only. It's about keeping the memories of the women he lost alive, and at the same time preventing more wives, daughters, mothers, and sisters from suffering the same fate. He has continued the fight on behalf of Cassandra and Charlotte after they are gone, making it a tribute to their lives. Pierce Brosnan might have been shaken by the losses of his wife and daughter, but he didn't let that grief define him. Instead, he used it to fuel a mission that has the potential to make a real difference in the world. And in doing so, he's giving others hope. Hope that, with the right awareness, research, and action, we can change the future for women affected by ovarian cancer. So, Pierce Brosnan's journey, filled with unimaginable grief and incredible strength, has not just been about enduring loss but also using his platform to make a real change. If you take anything from his journey, let it be this: we can all make a difference. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. How has Brosnan's story inspired you? Drop a comment below, share, and subscribe for more.